So, Esty, you're now in the sort of spotlight here. In some cases, we're seeing philanthropists banding together and pooling resources to have a greater impact. So I'm wondering if you could perhaps talk a little bit about this and what effect you think it's having on the philanthropic sector, particularly for artists and small to medium art screen and cultural organisations. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. And hello, I'm really pleased to be here as well. I think that question dovetails really nicely on what Louise was saying, because I completely agree that that strategy is more something I think that the support sector talks about than philanthropists actually do in practice. So I think people like to think they're strategic, but ultimately the decisions are going to be driven by an element of, either emotion or ego as well. And I think the collaborative funding solves both those problems. Because if we start from the base that, let's make the crazy assumption that every arts organisation is doing something valuable to the sector, then it's a matter of just crafting that to sell to a particular philanthropist or funder. The opportunities for collaborative funding, I divided in my head into two bands. I'll start with the one that I know least about, and I question whether it's actually been successful in the arts sector, which is where you have bigger donors coming together to solve systemic issues within the arts. That's starting to happen in the welfare sectors. I've seen it less in the arts sector. I know some of the bigger foundations are starting to think about it, but ultimately when you've got big players in the room trying to work together, the chance of them actually putting aside their egos and being willing to collaborate in that way is pretty minimal. But interested to hear it, afterwards, whether you've had experience of that. The thing that I've been more involved in and that I've seen be really successful is more like a giving circle. Where I've seen it work really well in the arts sector is pulling together a group of small funders, usually with some similar demographic or characteristics, so often by age, an under 40s group or a group that's interested in a particular issue to try and raise funds for a particular initiative. And so I think for a couple of examples, one, Urban Theatre Projects, for example, has started, a group. The name, I'm part of the group and the name escapes me, forgive me, but...
it's a giving circle, isn't it?
Essentially it is. And what that allows funders to do is it puts them, it makes them feel part of a community, which is really important for... I think establishing that connection to the company, but also to feel like they're part of something bigger. It solves the issue that, or goes part way to solving the issue that Louise referred to, which is the funder engagement piece, because you can essentially engage a group of funders through one mechanism, and you can also let them put them in the driver's seat to shape what their giving circle looks like. So it solves the ego aspect as well. That's really powerful as well, because it's that door in for a number of funders. They don't have to give as much. It can be a smaller amount. There can be a particular ask. There's a way to take them on a journey with a particular initiative so they can see that unfold over time, and that's something that they really value. And potentially it's a way, for people to start small, and as they grow to love the company and grow to feel part of the family, you really are garnering that long-term commitment as well. Does that make sense? Is that...
yes, it does. So can you give an example of what your giving circle at Urban Theatre Projects, what it's sort of supported so far? Because it's a fantastic way, it's kind of a bit of a gateway giving mechanism really, isn't it? Because as you develop that relationship and it gets stronger and bigger, it sort of grows the sort of confidence in not just the philanthropist, but also the organisation itself to sort of keep going.
Yeah, I think it's when you spoke about the confidence of the on one side the philanthropist and the confidence of the organisation itself. From the philanthropic sector, I think it's one of the greatest impacts it has is give people the confidence to talk about their giving as well, because they're part of a group that is all giving. There's not that reluctance to sort of to to outwardly promote or explain their giving as well. So, by creating a group like that, it also gives the philanthropists an avenue to be an ambassador for the company, because they can say that I'm part of this group, as opposed to me am giving, which is still, a very touchy subject, I think, for some.
Do you think it's touchy because some people in the arts might think, oh, look at that philanthropist, they're just one step away from commissioning a bronze sculpture of themselves?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think there's a, perhaps, I see people. Yeah.
Is there a tall poppy syndrome here? Maybe
perhaps in older generations, I know at least amongst my cohort, people celebrate the giving, but by the same token, it's much smaller amounts, and so that's why the collaborative giving or the giving circles are really effective for engaging the sort of under 40s crowd, who, let's face it, most of them don't have that much income spare. There's an argument they have plenty of money, but if they tell themselves that they have much.
They should give up their smashed avocado
exactly.
and then maybe they'd have more disposable income.
Exactly. Don't get me started. No. But then they would, and so it's a way to efficiently engage those people who, at age 60 will start giving much larger amounts, but it's recognising that journey starts early, and collaborative giving is one way to do that. The way I've seen it be really effective as well is where it's driven by a particular board member. So you can effectively, you come up with the program, but outsource the design of that to and the networking around that to a particular board member, and that speaks to. I think that's a question we're getting to later. But the value of having a younger board member on your board, and and a project for them to take on is to establish that network of younger givers or younger people who will engage with your organisation.
I think that's a great strategy.
Well, Guster, I do have if you got 30 seconds, I've got an example. You were questioning me about an example. And I don't want to give the Sydney Symphony as an example again, but back in the late 90s, the artistic director said to me, look, Louise, we really need to commission a new work here. Could you just pull 40 grand out of the hat from a donor? And I said, well, look, I'm not sure in this case, but let me talk to one donor. And I spoke to the one donor. I said, look, would you get together a group of friends, and how about we see if we can raise the 40K? So they had a dinner. It was not a fancy dinner. I went along with the artistic director, and the founding donor had said, we'll kick in 4 or 5K and we'll see if we can get the rest from the group of friends. And at the dinner, the artistic director waxed lyrical about the project and the type of music and the different composers. He knew exactly what he wanted to commission, but he made the potential donors feel as though they were involved in the project. A couple of red wines later, they said, absolutely, we'll kick in 4 or 5 grand, we'll match. 3 months later, they came to a concert, and after the concert, they had supper with the composer, and really enjoyed meeting the composer and understanding what it takes to actually write, a piece of classical music, symphonic music. 3 months later, the composer was doing a bit of creative development work with half a dozen musicians. The donors were invited to come along for an hour and sit in and observe what's going on. And of course, today with YouTube video, even if a donor couldn't see that in action, you can email them the 2-minute video and they, this is what you missed today, but make them feel involved. 3 months later, they came to the world premiere. They invited some friends. They bought tickets, and they had, they got a signed copy of the score. They got, a recording of it. Loved having the drinks afterwards. And 3 months later, they hopped on a plane and saw it, toured somewhere. But the point of the exercise is that it was a journey, and they were immersed in the project. It wasn't a transaction again. It's not like an end of financial year appeal where, which we're all probably busy working on at the moment. And those donors, 5 of those couples were not donors at the Sydney Symphony at the time of that project, and they're all still existing donors of the SSO today. So, it's what I call a group or a syndicate donation. That was sort of before, giving. This is back in the late 90s.
And I will say that, that's it doesn't even have to be, that's a fabulous example, but it can also be much more simple.
Tiny,
so if you're a small to medium arts company, it's even just come for coffee and we'll watch a rehearsal and there'll be some mineral water and a bag of chips. You know, that can, and then it's, you know, don't undervalue the enormous amount of value that funders place on that engagement with the artists themselves. We, when I set up the foundation, I did it with my mother, and it took us about 2 or 3 years to actually admit to ourselves that that was a really important part of, you know, some of the arts companies we gave to, which was the artistic engagement, because we don't, you know, while we're great lovers of the arts, have absolutely no talent in the arts. I don't, you know, my friends aren't artists. I don't get to see that, and that, you know, to have that access, and, you know, it's inspiring to be able to meet the artists and speak to them. So it can be very simple. A lot of, you know, if I think about, say, Belvoir and Urban Theatre Projects, who both do, you know, smaller circles, it's often just coming to a couple of rehearsals, maybe coffee with the artistic director, seeing the show, and then the rest of it's driven by the circle itself. So we might get together, you know, with different members of the circle for lunch and talk about our shared love of arts or something like that. But it doesn't have to be as, you know, too time intensive, and the opportunities to engage don't have to be something extraordinary. You know, that actually just what you guys all do every day is quite extraordinary for donors.